make a product that is going to last for a long time.
That's the key. You're back to the point of it's your reputation as an installer. You don't want to have your customers coming back for failed film because you're trying to save a few bucks.
Yeah. Hey, what a beautiful day, and welcome back to the Dark But Legal podcast, but this one's got a twist. This is Dark But Legal Beyond the Film, a mini episode series where we dig deeper into the topics that you guys want us to discuss. And as always, I have a very special guest of mine, Mr. Bill Stewart, with me today, and today we're going to be deep diving into auto construction. So that is auto window film construction. So Mr. Bill,
how are you
doing?
Doing great.
So you got a class going on yesterday and today, huh?
I do, and they're on autopilot.
Yeah.
They're back there rocking and rolling, doing mirrors.
Back there doing some mirrors. So with automotive window film, it begs the question, the biggest thing, especially with some of our lines of film, is the glue, the adhesive.
The mounting adhesive.
Yep, the mounting adhesive.
Correct.
So can we break this down further and discuss what the adhesive even is? What is film even constructed of?
Well, there's a number of different ways to construct automotive film. And what I was going to do is go through from, I guess, the easiest way to construct it to one of the hardest ways. Okay. And I'm going to try to do it in layman's terms so everybody can understand what I'm saying. So the first way to dye film, now we're just talking about a regular dyed product, is glue dye, is what they call it. So in other words, they put the glue in the mounting adhesive. Okay? So you have you have the glass, and then you have the mounting adhesive, which is your adhesive layer, with glue in it. And then you have a clear polyester, and then you have a scratch coat.
Okay.
Okay, so you think about that construction for a moment. It's the easiest way, most economical way to manufacture an auto film.
Yeah.
But it brings its own set of problems because you have the dye exposed to the first layer that the sun hits.
Okay.
Okay? So it's coming through the glass, it hits that adhesive layer, and you got dye.
Yeah.
So your stability, your dye stability, I got to be careful, I want to be politically correct, isn't going to be as stable as a different type of construction.
Okay.
Okay, and there has been stories of where if you squeegee too hard, you push too hard, you'll actually squirt some of the adhesive out and the dye will come out with it.
Really?
And there's been some instances where when you're in the process of installing the film on the window, some of the dye will go down the door panel.
Holy shit.
Right.
Wow.
So it can be a problematic construction. Now, granted, it's very economically priced, it's positioned, it has its place in the market. I know some people that sell it as funny as you may think, as a rental car film.
Really? That's how they market it.
That's how they market it. So and it's in southern Florida.
Okay.
So you go into Florida and you're going to spend a couple of weeks or a week. You're going to go to Disney, whatever. You rent a car.
Yeah.
And it's hot. It's nasty. Right?
Hell
so
you
take it over to a tint shop and say, look, man, I want a window tint. It's going to last me 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And what's the price? Put it on. What's the price when I bring it back, pull it off before I take it to the rental car? And that's true. They do it.
Yeah.
And they'll just slap tint that stuff. I'm assuming they roll the window down, the side windows. Sometimes they don't. You get the little bit of gap going on or a big gap going on. But either way, there's a niche market for everything. It's great for learning how to window tint because it's cheap, economical. You learn how to do it, it's gone. There's always that market, okay?
Yeah.
So typically the professional market in the U.S. market, let me clarify that, doesn't offer that type of product.
Okay.
Okay, because of the longevity and because to be competitive as an installer, a professional installer, you're going to need to do the lifetime warranty.
Yep.
Or at least a 5 to 7 year warranty and then lifetime.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So next way to do it is to put the dye in the laminate adhesive layer.
Okay. So right before you laminate.
Well, actually what happens is you would have your mounting adhesive.
Yep.
you would have a weatherable polyester
Yep.
layer. Okay, what weatherable means is that the UV inhibitors were extruded with the polyester. So it's a more
Okay.
robust, clear. It's clear.
Yeah.
It's a more robust product
Okay.
than regular clear polyester. And then you would have the laminating adhesive where you're going to laminate it to another clear.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so that adhesive that's in the middle, you can dye that.
Wow.
So if you want a 5%, you throw more dye.
Yeah.
If you want a 50%, you don't put as
You
much
don't
in.
put as much in there.
Right.
Yeah.
It has its own quirks also. Okay.
Okay.
It typically does not shrink like some of the other film constructions we're going to talk about next. It shrinks well, but it does have a point where it will only shrink to that point.
Oh.
And because we consider that like it gets crispy or whatever, like it'll
Yeah.
shrink to a certain point and then it just doesn't have that ability, like for instance, a dye bath product, which is what we're going to talk about next.
Okay. So
Okay.
there's a point where you could really
Right.
mess it up, you know.
Well, you won't mess it up. You'll end up burning it if
Yeah.
you go too far, or if you're too aggressive. So if you're dry shrinking, you usually don't have a problem with it. But if you're trying to get in there with a blowtorch and really hammer it
Yeah.
for speed, that's not really the film for you.
Okay.
Okay. Also, it typically won't turn purple.
Makes sense.
It'll go clear.
Yeah.
So if
Like
you ever,
like all the dye will come out of it.
the dye will cook out.
Yeah.
Okay, and you see it where it has a dyed line where the window's been rolled up, and you roll the window down,
Okay.
and you got a dye line right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's either a glue dyed film or it's going to be a dye in a laminate. Typically.
Now it's all making sense.
Right. And now it's not as easy of a way to manufacture that. There's certain manufacturers, one I worked for years, that really perfected that technique. I'm seeing more of it coming over from the Asian markets. A lot of that is dye in a laminate construction because
Okay.
they don't have dye bath machines, or they can't circumvent who has them.
Yeah.
It's cost prohibitive, so it's easier to make it. Okay, so there's that. The next one I just mentioned is dye bath.
Yeah.
And that is one of the most color stable ways to make dyed film.
Okay.
Okay. And what that is, it's a weatherable polyester that goes through basically in layman's terms, a bath of dye.
Yeah.
Okay. So the slower you go, or you can double pass it and you'll get the darker VLT.
Okay. So essentially it's just a timed effect.
Correct.
The longer you leave it
and
in,
they
the darker
stretch
it's
the
gonna be.
polyester. What they'll do is they'll stretch it, and then the dye will leach in. Okay,
Do
so
you-
in theory, if you took that piece of film, put it under a microscope, and you cut it in half,
Yeah.
okay, you're going to get a layer of dye, layer of clear, and dye in that one piece of polyester. It won't
Okay.
go all. It doesn't typically saturate all the way through.
Yeah.
And then you protect it with a UV in the inhibitor in the laminate layer, and then a clear.
With a film constructed like that, would you see more differences in VLTs? Like, would you see more plus or minus with a
Typically, a
bad dye?
manufacturer, it's a good question, because a manufacturer has what they call a manufacturer spec for all their
Yeah.
film. Typically, it's plus or minus 3.
Yep.
So if your target is just make one up 20%, okay, that one run could be 18.
Yeah.
Another run could be 22.
Yep.
Okay, that's going to fall within manufacturer spec.
Okay. I was just
Okay,
curious
because
if one over the other.
you can't nail it right
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
money every time. So you got to have some sort of leeway. Now, the human eye can't really see 1 or 2%. Now,
No.
if you put them side by side,
Yeah.
you would. So it's always wise to not change run numbers when you're tinting a car.
Yep.
So a car comes in and wants 35 all the way around. You run out of, you don't have enough 35 of one run number, and you start it with another. Sometimes
There
you
may
don't
be a
hit the
slight-
same. Correct.
Yeah. The tolerances will be just
Correct.
slightly different.
You'll see a difference in the VLT.
Okay.
Okay. And it, by the way, won't turn clear.
What will that one do?
It it can have a tendency to turn purple.
Okay.
But that's long. I mean, these dyes now and the stability, they last a long, long time. It's not like, think about it. You drive around down here in Baton Rouge where it's hot.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of purple cars.
No, not at all.
No. It's because the stability is good.
Was there a reason back in the day, in the early days, that it was almost just straight off the line purple?
It was the UV inhibitor, and it was the difference of the PET and the adhesives.
Okay.
It's just technology is catching up.
Yeah.
Which, as we go down the list of the constructions, you're going to find out that, technology is really caught up because it gets better and better.
Yeah.
All the manufacturers have their R&D facilities, and they're chugging along to get a film that's going to last a little bit longer.
Yep.
Because think about it, they're all on the hook for the lifetime warranty.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, if you make a product that...
And you're going to sit there and you're going to hang your name on, say it's lifetime. Of course, there's always the question of whose lifetime, mine, yours, car,
Yeah,
film.
exactly, the car.
So I think the percentage of that someone keeps a car now, and maybe it's different because of our economic times. It used to be 5 to 7 years.
Yep.
And maybe it's a little longer now because interest rates are a little bit higher and cars last longer. I mean, when I was younger, you traded a car at 50,000 miles.
Yeah.
And I remember, quick story, I remember my parents or my grandparents would say, you'd see a car for sale and they said, well, it was only highway miles. That's how they used to sell them.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what's the difference? Right? Well, highway miles is doing this. It's not stopping and starting and turning and whatever.
It's not putting as much wear and tear on it.
Right. I just remember that as a kid, it was highway miles or, it only went downhill on Sunday.
Yeah.
You ever heard that one?
No, never heard that one. Only downhill on Sunday.
Only went downhill on Sunday. Anyway, I'm aging myself again. So the next one is a very robust way to dye polyester, and that's extrusion.
Okay.
They've all heard that word. And what that means is that, for instance, raw PET is beads. It's clear beads. They look like you've seen them.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Little clear beads. And what they do is they inject dye into those beads, and it goes through this troffer. An extruder is a big screw, for lack of a better term.
They'll basically hit, and then it'll come out.
And that screw heats it.
Yeah.
And what it does is when it heats it, it melts that dye into the polyester, and when it comes out the other end, which is your coating head, it comes out as a dyed material.
Yep.
That has its own. It's a very, very robust way to dye film.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to the microscope. If you cut that polyester in that, looked at the side of it, that dye is going to go all the way through.
Ooh.
You see what I mean? That's the difference. And then you marriage that with UV inhibitor polyester, and you marriage that with the clear. You got a bulletproof product.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. So you ask me, well, why don't you see more and more of that type of construction?
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of manufacturers that can do that. And it's not, I hate to use the word cheap because it's not cheap. It's expensive. It's more of an expensive way to manufacture product.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go bad. And there are some out there that are available in the market now that have been around for years and years and years.
And that's the whole race, is make a product that is going to last for a long time.
That's the key. Again, you're back to the point of it's your reputation as an installer. Okay. You don't want to have your customers coming back for your failed film because you're trying to save a few bucks.
Yeah, exactly.
Manufacturer's on the hook. Typically nowadays, warranty process, the guys just redo it. It's your customer. You want to make sure they're right. You're taken care of. If it gets to be a problem, then you get the manufacturer involved, typically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Back in the old days, it was every car that came back was a warranty claim.
Yep.
Okay. So times have changed. The next one is one of my favorite type of constructions. I find it one of the most robust, and it has really good specifications for heat, and that's a hybrid. That's a dye metal.
Yep.
So basically, you're taking a dye bath product, and you're putting a layer of aluminum.
Yeah.
A vapor-coated aluminum metal layer in there. Okay? And that metal layer, in theory, in your mind, is protecting that dye, along with the UV inhibitors and along with the extruded UV weatherable polyester.
Okay. So it's like all the protections in one.
Everything is there, and it's a good performer. It's a good heat performer. It's been around for years. I was putting that on back in the 80s, that type of product.
Damn.
And it's making a kind of a comeback. It took a little bit of a bump back when AM antennas were in the rear window.
Yeah.
Remember that when they integrated it with the defrosters?
Yeah.
And the car manufacturers was actually put that in their owner's manual. You can't use metallized film to tint it.
Yep.
Because the the 9 people that listened to AM radio had a problem with it.
Was it also like the?
Sorry, I'm not
so
insulting any of you
Mercedes.
that do AM radio.
They're listening to like Old Town Funk on AM,
Right, or
but
baseball
even
games.
like the old like luxury, because so Mercedes and stuff that would put phones in cars, it would mess with those too.
Back in
Couldn't
the
really
day.
call out and everything.
Well, do you remember the exterior cell phone antennas?
Yeah.
Right, and they used to run the wire.
Yep.
Well, we used to have to take those off to tint the car,
Gee.
and they had to put them all back on.
Yeah.
Right, and now everything has the shark fin.
Yep.
So technically, everything is outside of the car. You can basically tint your car with what you want.
Yeah, 100%. Nowadays, yeah. But back in the day, you couldn't. And that's why even
Correct.
some of our brochures still say, what they say, like, won't interfere with radios or anything.
It still comes, and it's really, unless you use that kind of a product and where your antennas are mounted.
Yeah.
And I guess it's a blanket disclosure comment. 'Cause,
Basically,
like
yeah.
what if you get an older car?
Yeah, and you never know if you.
Right,
You
and
never
these
know.
guys, and so I would imagine it would be a challenge for some of these newer installers to even, due to the age group and the difference of car generations, manufacturing generations, you don't even think about where the antenna is.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. The next one is even more aggressive on that aspect, and that's a full metallized auto film. Now, most of the state laws for reflectivity
Yeah.
have killed that product. Okay, because if I'm not mistaken, the average reflectivity law for most states or all the states in America is nothing over 19%, which, by
Wow.
the way, is quite reflective.
Yeah, I was about to say that's.
Right. I
That's
think Hawaii
crazy.
used to be one that you could have reflective film on it. And they just recently changed their law, so I'm not sure how they rewrote
Yeah.
that. But typically in states, the law enforcement doesn't like reflective film. It's almost like hey, pull me over,
Yeah.
because it's so boom. But it's a great performer, obviously, because it's metal. It's like putting a silver flat glass film on your house.
Yeah.
It's going to really be a heat rejector.
Well, that's what I tell people for moonroofs and sunroofs and stuff.
Absolutely,
Throw super alloy on that thing.
absolutely. Why not? And that's not illegal.
Yeah.
Right, and you're not going to risk blowing the sunroof
Yeah.
for overexposure because you don't have a high absorption rate with
Yeah.
that type of product. So, but you don't really see them much anymore. It's not.
No, it's
something
not
you see,
popular.
and it's not super easy to shrink.
Yeah.
back in the old days.
When I bought a 1995 Chevrolet Silverado, and it had the 2 back extended cab windows, they were done. It looked like mirrors.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this looks original. This is
I
OG
was about
stuff.
to say, I remember when that was a factory. That was factory.
Yeah.
And the one vehicle comes to mind is the old Lexus SUVs.
Okay.
They had a bronzy metal to the rear of the B pillar, which is right behind the driver and passenger.
I bet that was a beautiful look.
Well, the hardest problem was, as an installer back in those days, and this was in the 80s, you couldn't match it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was like it's shiny here and it was tinted.
Yep.
Like, it was.
That was it.
Yeah, and so they got rid of all of that. Everything now is much easier to mix and match your
Yeah.
side windows to the rear of the vehicle. So the next one is something new into the U.S. market. I guess new being last 10 years is carbon particle deposit
Yeah.
product. Carbon is basically, for lack of a better term, graphite. Okay, but it also holds dye.
Okay.
So when you buy a carbon film, you start with the base carbon, and that's going to be a certain VLT.
Okay.
I think it's 40%. I might be wrong, so don't kill me on the comments. But it's in that range, I believe. And then you have to dye it whatever way you can, either in the laminate layer or add a layer of dye bath product to it.
Okay.
Okay, and that'll get you to the desired VLT.
Interesting.
So it does have dye. Now it's a good IR. It's good. It's not great. But
Yeah.
it's good. It's a good heat rejector type of product. Just carbon in general.
Yeah.
But it's also very stable. So there's two sides. Now you will see this came up today in a conversation. Carbon films typically have a reddish, brownish hue to them.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and that's the carbon that you're looking at, and they try to dye it against that. Does that make sense?
Oh, now I'm understanding.
So
Okay.
that's why it has that look. So there's a certain amount. But you're going to see more and more of that. Predominantly, that type of product comes from Asia. Okay, they have the equipment that they're able to coat that.
Yeah.
Depends on the type of coater that they have. But I have a feeling that if it continues to gain market share, you'll see some of the American manufacturers jump up to that, or at least figure it out. I don't think their machines are tooled for that, so it's a volume decision.
Yeah.
Next one is nano ceramic, which is ceramic, nanoparticle. Pick that terminology. Nano obviously is small.
Yeah.
Ceramic is just your type of, it's a non-metal based particle.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you look at a nano product or a nano ceramic product, there's a couple of things that are give and take with that product. Okay. If you look at a 70%, it's going to look blue.
Yep.
Okay.
100%,
70% is your starting point for IR nanoparticles.
Yeah.
And then you got to work down.
Yeah, so it's not like the carbon where you're
Which
working
is kind of
from,
in the middle.
Yeah, you're in the middle.
I think.
With the nano ceramic, you're at the
70.
Yeah.
So if you look at anybody that's a nano product, high performing windshield film, just about everybody, it's going to be bluish.
Yeah.
Okay, that's your nano, and ceramic particles and nanoparticles is a dye. IR is a dye.
Okay.
Okay, so you start at that 70 and then you dye it down. So you can dye bath it, or you can color it and laminate to get it down to a 5%. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The risk of that is where you put the carbon, the IR particles. Not carbon, sorry, the IR particles.
Huh.
Because IR works by absorption. It doesn't work by rejection. Okay, so what IR is, it's a small section of the light
Spectrum,
heat spectrum. And I don't want to get into all that technical stuff.
Oh yeah, because there's a controversy.
Well, it is a controversy because you can meter it a couple of ways. You can meter narrow band.
Yep.
And you can meter wide band.
Yep.
And there's two different meters. One will meter and it'll say, hey, it's 98% IR rejection, but is it the short band or is it the wide band?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. That's a whole nother segment.
Right. And so most manufacturers will take that IR particles and put it in the scratch coat.
Okay.
So you think about where it's positioned: mounting adhesive, weatherable polyester, dye if it's in the dye and laminate, or laminate adhesive, dye bath product.
Yep.
Scratch coat with IR.
Okay.
So it's blocking it right there.
Yeah.
Okay. If it was on the other side, it would absorb so much it could actually attack the dye layer because you're adding too much heat.
Yeah, and it's just breaking down those particles.
So when you tint a car with an IR product, it doesn't matter whose it is, and it sits in the parking lot, it's hotter than when you tinted it.
Yeah.
Okay, but when you move the car, convection kicks in, takes the heat off the car, and it cools down faster.
Yeah.
So it's cooler when you're moving. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, even with my truck, of course, my truck is double layered, but still, it's the effect. Like Trey's truck, we just did his. And when it's sitting there, yeah, of course, if you put a thermometer in it, it's hot. It's going to be hot. I mean, glass, people don't realize that glass, how much glass there is. There's a lot of glass surface area in there. And whenever you're moving, though, your AC is not working as hard. Like if you put it all the way down low, that's when you can start to tell, okay, this is a good quality film. Once you start moving,
it's going to cool off faster. Yeah. Like you can say, okay, I used to be able to have to go 2 stoplights down before my car was cool. Now with an IR type product, it might be almost to the first.
Yeah.
It happens fast. I have it on my truck, right? And I can tell the difference.
Yeah.
That's why windshield application, which I don't really want to get into that too much, is so popular.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, your windshield is a huge heat gain.
It's giant.
Instrument.
It's giant.
Right. And some of the manufacturers have tried to mess with windshields and tried to make reflective. I remember Lexus, I'll pick on Lexus. Lexus had one. I believe Ford had one that when you looked at it, it looked like it was filmed. It looked like it had a metal layer on it.
Wow.
It was a coating that they tried to put on it. Okay. And if you might be too young, but remember when cars, if you do remember, your dad would know, or you've seen them, when car dashes used to crack all the time?
Yeah, 100%. I had an old truck that the dash was cracked.
You never see dashes crack now.
Yeah, no.
You know why? because there's UV inhibitor in the PVB layer of the windshield.
In the windshield now. Yeah.
Right. So it's stopping. The other thing that happens with IR products is the size of the particle dictates how much low angle haze you get.
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Right.
You know?
So the bigger the particle, the more haze you're going to experience. The smaller the particle, the less haze you're going to have. Smaller the particle, the more expensive. Bigger the particle, not so much.
Back in the day, how much low angle haze did y'all get? It was probably
when
a
it
lot.
first started, it was terrible. You would get the right angle, and your windshield, and I'll say windshield, or your side window would turn blue. And what's happening is the light gets in there and hits those particles and bounces around.
Yeah.
And that's what your eye sees.
Or
you would get halos at night.
Yep.
Things like that. And that's angle. That's the light reflecting it at an angle off of those particles that will give it that halo effect. So, again, the smaller the particle, the better. The more expensive.
The bigger the particle, the less you're going to see out of your window.
Right. At certain angles.
At certain angles.
Right.
That light's going to be bouncing around.
Then, again, these are layman terms, definitions. I could get a whole lot more technical, but it's not worth it. But that'll give you a better idea of how the films are positioned, in manufacturing. And there's some other stuff that's out there, and there's other tricks that some manufacturers use, and there's some new technologies coming out. I'm assuming every manufacturer's R&D department is trying to find the next.
Yep, it's always
the next
growing.
magic bullet.
Yeah.
And over the years, my 40 years in the industry, I've seen all types of trial and errors.
Yeah.
Throughout it, and it seems right now that the market, I think, for technology is somewhat stable.
Yeah.
Nobody's really coming out with anything earth-shattering.
Not in this industry, I don't think. Right. I think in other avenues of technology
is caught up.
Yeah.
Kind of.
It's kind of caught up a good bit there.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And again, I know these are going to be shorter podcasts, and I think we're going to do another one probably next month or so.
Yep.
And we're going to tackle, dig in a little deeper on flat glass, and we'll dig in on constructions of different flat glass. And which, by the way, could end up being 2 podcasts, because flat glass opens up a whole realm of questions, and with the new glass types that are available now, it's difficult.
Flat glass is a big ball game.
Yes, it is.
You got to put on your big boy pants when you get into flat glass.
You do, and you got to know your glass.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's the biggest challenge, is not knowing the films.
Yeah.
The market, in my opinion, it's shifted.
Yeah.
The films are what they are, and you look at the certain numbers, which we'll discuss next month on, absorption and shading coefficients and numbers like that dictate the performance of the film. Then you got to put that, and absorption is a big number.
Yeah.
And where the low E coatings are is huge on whether you're going to break glass or not.
And there's lots of little tips and tricks.
Yes, there is. And like I said, we'll discuss that next month. And I just want to do a plug for the new Geoshield Academy, as you can see in the background. State of the art. We'll be doing PPF. I know we're talking window film, but I'm going to do my plug anyway. We're going to be doing PPF training once a month until probably I can't do it anymore. So we'll see. And it's just a great facility. So stay tuned, and thank you.
Yes, sir. Well, I appreciate it again, Mr. Bill.
Absolutely.
And I hope that all you guys listening or watching have learned just a little bit more about the window films that you're using currently. And like Mr. Bill said, next month we'll dive into flat glass. But for now, that's it for Dark But Legal Beyond the Film. We'll see you guys on the next one.